Hello everyone, and thanks for watching my channel again, and I am back with a tech video. In this video I will be doing some comparison between two graphics cards in iRacing, because there aren't any or too many comparison or benchmarks that have focus on a sim racing title out there. I got the new AORUS 1080 Ti graphics card, and I want to compare it to my old GIGABYTE 980 Ti graphics card. So I will be asking some questions and also delivering some answers. So here we go. Okay, as you already know, the new Nvidia GTX 1080 Ti graphics card is the most powerful consumer-based card aimed for pure gaming on the market to date. So the star of today's video is the GIGABYTE AORUS GTX 1080 Ti. My ambition is to show how fast this card is and comparing it to my old GIGABYTE 980 Ti Extreme Edition card in the racing simulator iRacing. It is no real contest between the two cards on paper, but the question is if it's worth the upgrade in terms of performance compared to the high price tag. GIGABYTE is releasing several GeForce GTX 1080 Ti models. The version that I got is in the middle of the current lineup, and the card has some quite high out-of-the-box overclock. The GPU boost is at 708 MHz and the memory ticks in at 11 GB per second speed. Let's talk about the price first, and don't tell my wife I bought this card. It is just a stupid amount of money if we look at the short lifespan this kind of hardware have. I could get an Oculus Rift VR setup, a whole new entry-level PC system for the same amount of cash, or almost two Thrustmaster TS PC Racer wheel for a quick comparison. So why did I bought it? Well, one thing that previously always pointed out the direction for choosing a new graphics card was when a new generation of card hits the market that are twice as fast as my current graphics card. It was time to upgrade. That time has come again, so my GIGABYTE 980 Ti Extreme Edition card is now sold, and I had that card for almost 2 years. The question is, was it worth the upgrade when having playing around with the GIGABYTE AORUS GTX 1080 Ti for about 2 weeks? Well, I can tell you that much. The smell of new hardware sweating in my sim cave is awesome, and just that perspective is worth a hell of a lot. Things that matter here are of course what games you will be aiming playing and at what resolutions. This card does not make much sense comparing to a GTX 980 Ti when doing 1080p gaming. It is when stepping up the resolution to 3K and 4K this card delivers its engineering muscles. I have not confirmed this during my own testing, but other reviewers have come to the same conclusion, so it's a fair assumption. As you probably know, I got 3 1080p screens set up in my sim racing rig with a max resolution of 5760 1080, which is 75% of the resolution of a 4K screen, so the card should fit nicely here. I will be playing and driving laps in iRacing to test the card out, because that is the game and simulator that I mostly use. I hope to see some improvements in terms of FPS, otherwise it will be a big bummer. More or less FPS does not tell the whole story about the performance and quality of a graphics card, but it will clearly show potential differences when comparing two cards. I will also look a bit into the Smp function on the 1080 Ti card and see if there are any benefits with that feature in iRacing. And I will also be doing some additional synthetic benchmark in the FutureMark test suite and Unity Valley for the fun of it, at the end of the video. Let's start by showing the specs of my PC system and software used when doing this comparison. When doing my test sessions, the 980 Ti card reached its max core clock running at 1500 MHz, and the 1080 Ti card reached just above 2000 MHz. The Nvidia GPU Boost 2.0 on the 980 Ti card and 3.0 on the 1080 Ti card do kick in and stretcheth both cards to its maximum stable levels. My in-game graphic settings in iRacing are of course the same when running the both cards. There are no easy graphic setting slider from low to ultra in iRacing that are seen in many other games. It is very much up to the user to get to know the settings and what the settings actually do. And that is not a bad thing, as you can tweak a lot of stuff to make the game run nice and smooth for just your PC system. If you got the time for messing with checking and unchecking boxes, I must add. I have made a video about iRacing graphic setting just a month ago, so go check that out if you are interested. There are no in-game graphics benchmark tool in iRacing, so the best way to get a scenario that is dependable is to do a basic alone test session. iRacing is an online racing simulator where many cars drive at the same time, and those circumstances had been the best way to do this test. But as each race or practice sessions are not the same in terms of how many drivers are connected and variations in weather conditions, it is hard to get the same load on the GPU during those online testing sessions. As seen in the video, using an iRacing replay as a benchmarking tool are not working either, because of the fact that the sim uses different graphic setting for replays than in-game graphic settings, and the scenario are therefore not the same. The FPS count are not making much sense, and the configuration when driving the race in the first place using my 980 Ti card is playing too big of a factor here. We got no use of this. To really push the two cards to their limits, I turned up some eye candy. II was set to its max setting at 8, dynamic track and tire data was turned on, and I got shadow maps on everything and particles at high. I set frame rate to no limit, so no use of any VSync technology, and as you can see my resolution is 5760 1080 with multi-projection on. I got Smp off because the 980 Ti card does not support that technology. iRacing is a CPU heavy game, and my Intel i7-4790K CPU is constantly clocked at 4.7 GHz to make the best out of it. That would also avoid any potential bottlenecks that could be restraining the GPU to work freely. I drove 2 laps around Phoenix International Raceway with no other cars, and the weather and time of day conditions were the same. You can see the FPS meter up to my right on both in-game screens, and at the end of the lap I will spin the car around to create some smoke that is really demanding on the GPU. As I am in a lonely testing session, I will obviously get more FPS and overall smoothness compared to when doing online racing along 35 other cars. A reasonable calculation is that we can nearly cut the FPS in half to simulate what the actual FPS and the load on the GPU will be under normal racing circumstances. As seen in the video, when comparing the two cards side by side, there are real benefits in terms of more FPS with the 1080 Ti card over the 980 Ti card. When just doing laps and riding along, the difference in FPS is hovering around 70 to 100. When we get more FPS, there are a clear difference in terms of smoothness shown in the video, and the 980 Ti card to the left is appearing more choppier than the 1080 Ti card, despite running at rather high FPS. When doing the donut and smoke at the end, the difference between the two cards are even more obvious. Here we can see 1080 Ti card being up to 3 times faster. I think that scenario is correspondent to a race start where many cars are visible on the grid, and that is really taxing in the GPU in terms of loading textures and casting shadows around the track. The 1080 Ti card during race sessions is not necessarily 3 times faster than a 980 Ti card, but I believe after also running off video in different race sessions, both oval, road and dirt, it have a higher consistent frame rate with less FPS drops compared to the 980 Ti card. So, the more demanding environment, the better the 1080 Ti card will perform. And it is not always shown in the terms of an FPS count. One more thing is that iRacing still is a CPU heavy game, despite running DX11, so just upgrading the GPU don't make it as fast as 1080 Ti benchmarks graphs on the internet shows. In iRacing compared to other more common first-person shooter titles, we see less impact of upgrading the GPU. At this current state, must say, iRacing is continuously optimizing the graphics engine and the codes, so things may improve in the matter in the future. I do hope so. An implementation of a mature DX12 or a Vulkan API would be a blessing, but fairly unlikely. Moving on, the Nvidia Smp function on the Pascal 1080 Ti card is when activated bumping up the FPS to around 25% in some scenarios. But due to the limitations in terms of maximum supported side screen angle, it's clamped to 45 degrees, and the real bummer that the maximum field of view is clamped to low 160 degrees, I choose not to have this function activated. My testing shows that even at the field of view setting at 160, that should work. The function is malfunctioning with graphics artifact on the side screen, and despite adjusting the seat position in the camera tool, I could not get a decent setting out of it. Also, when SMP is enabled, some DX11 features must be adjusted for compatibility. Particles details is set to low, dynamic night shadows are disabled, and depth of field effects are also disabled. Here are some synthetic benchmark results comparing the two cards, and also a benchmark that shows what the 1080 Ti card can deliver manually overclocked. So there you have it. The GIGABYTE 980 Ti Extreme Editions card is a fast card in iRacing, no question about that. But the GIGABYTE AORUS 1080 Ti card, to no one's surprise, is faster and have more horsepower to deliver a higher, more constant frame rate. We don't see the same performance increase in iRacing compared to other titles when upgrading the GPU. But the extra power that we get is clearly noticeable and highly valued. The question is if it's worth the upgrades in terms of performance compared to the price tag. And I say, yes it is. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you in future iRacing related videos. Bye bye!